Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday or Friday, depending where you're joining us from today. I'm Kyler Cheatham from The Confluential, and this is The Confluential Live. So I'm very excited to be able to welcome you. We do go live every single day. Typically, it's at 11 a.m. Eastern time, but we have some client work that we're doing on the west coast of the U.S. today, and we need to make it a little bit earlier in order to get to service them. So with that, I'm excited to welcome Adam, our guest, and just kind of open the floor to this conversation. Before I do, I just want to go through a few logistics. No matter where you're joining from today, or if you're listening to the replay, you can drop a comment in any sort of platform and we can see it, or we'll go back in and address it. So the questions is just to add dialogue. That's really our mission here, is to bring that sort of transparency that there is no real right way for you to do technology strategy. Right? Your technology strategy needs to be built around the nuances and the unique DNA of your business, and having everyone's thoughts in the comments or asking questions, no matter how, how easy, or how, I can't even think of the words right now, but how dropping those in the chat, just to make sure that people are understanding what we're talking about today. So with that, if you text or test the chat, or hopefully I get a little better at this. I'm traveling, and our kids are 4 and 6, and early mornings for us moms out there is never a small feat to transition mom life to professional life. So bear with me while I get through that. But if you could just drop where you're joining from today, and then I'll turn it over to Adam to introduce himself, and then talk about the importance of kind of this AI in tactical theory as versus just concepts.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. My name's Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of The Confluential. And excited for this topic today. One of the things that we find a lot in the marketplace that we have a ton of fun with, actually, is that AI is still so fragmented in the industry, right? Every AI does something slightly different. Everybody does something slightly different with AI. And we're finding that most organizations, if not all of them, that talk about what they do in AI are really kind of one-trick ponies, right? They do one thing. And what that one thing is good for them, but the purpose isn't to do, as you try to integrate AI with your business, the purpose isn't to do one thing well. You do a lot of things in your business, and how you use AI to do a lot of things well often includes a more architected approach that is built around all of the things that you want to do well, and trying to make them bite-sized enough to say, we're going to do this well in AI, we're going to do this well in AI, and pulling those together in a way where they really come and add value for you. So I'm joining today from Spokane, Washington. Super excited to be here. It's a beautiful day. Spring is starting to really arrive. It's starting to green up, so it's fun to see, especially with a little bit of moisture, which is different than back home. But excited for this conversation today, for sure.
Absolutely. I think this conversation specifically is so important, and it's been something that's really relevant to the conversations that we've been having, because everyone has AI, right? This is a solution in which, especially on the vendor side in the marketplace,
I have
there's
AI
so
right
much,
here.
right? Exactly. There's so much aspiration. And I was talking to someone yesterday, and they're like, "Oh, I do X, Y, and Z in AI." And they were, that must be what you do too. And I'm like, absolutely, actually, no. I don't do front end business AI, right? I don't do Gen AI when it comes to building out those certain communications, whether you're looking for something to write you an email, or build change scripts, or build demo scripts, or find requirements. Some of that layer into what we do, but we do more of the complex. How does AI help you to get a return on investment? And that's the biggest thing that I see a gap in, is we have kind of all of these, like you said, hit wonders as far as AI vendors that don't actually work that well, because they haven't had proven test cases around that. So I think it's helpful to kind of start this conversation with looking at the different pieces of what AI can bring to the business. So on one hand, we're talking about the front end of the business. This could be something like lead traffic to sell your product. This could be something like talking to a certain customer profile, those types of things in which AI can build voices around and give you that type of integration, whether it's finding you leads, mining these different places. That is one type of AI in itself. When we're talking about enterprise AI in the way that we refer to it, a lot of times that can be Gen AI, it just depends. But we're more looking at operationally, how can AI make you more efficient by organizing the data so you can make good strategic business decisions? The challenge with that is you have to find the right AI vendor. And I cannot stress that enough. We've already, gone through this industry landscape where working and managing our partners is one of the most challenging piece. But now you have AI vendors that will kind of drop the application in your lap and totally peace out, and you have no idea, how to utilize those or manage those in any way, shape, or form. So when we're adding that partner management into our AI vendors, it's so critical that you're expecting just as much from them as you are from your enterprise partners.
Well, I think that's fair, but you also have to, as you expect things, you also have to realize that you can't expect too much from any one spot, right? We're as a population and a society, we're so used to getting everything that we want at our fingertips all in one place, right? I mean, think of the idea that people compare the AI revolution to the smartphone revolution pretty pretty well, and I think that there's something to be said for that, right? The idea that you could have a small computer in your pocket has changed the way we live. I don't know that my kids would even know what to do with a phone that was attached to the
Mhm.
wall. It didn't have a screen on it, right? They don't know to use it to make phone calls. They don't want to use it to make phone calls. They want to use it to do other stuff. And that's how life has changed. And AI is doing something very similar, but you have to know what you're doing with it. AI isn't a phone, it's an application. And each AI out there, just like any individual phone started out, does things differently. I remember the first phone that connected to the internet, and it still had like a green screen interface. It was the craziest thing. Like this doesn't have pictures, but what is happening here?
Yeah.
AI is still in that kind of a fragmented space where you won't get everything out of your AI the same way you get everything on your phone, and that's okay. You just need to know what you're doing with it, because that's where I go back to the idea of architecting how
Yeah.
AI fits into your business. It needs to be something that's targeted so that you can say, this is how we're going to use this AI here, the same way we know how we're going to use that AI over there. And that's really what you got to
Mhm.
start really thinking about. Because, I mean, we use AI. I mean, how many AI tools do we use? I can think of at least three off the top of
Yeah.
my head right now. And
Yeah.
and as I'm thinking through it, I just added two more. We use all kinds of them. They're a ton of fun.
Mhm.
Um, it's even to the point where you can start having different conversations with different AIs to see if they give you different results, and they do. Right? You can have the same conversation with two different AIs and have two different answers and two totally different discussions, the same way you would with two different people. Right? And they
Mhm.
you have to know that going into this, and then you had to start asking questions. And I'm curious about what you're seeing about
Yeah.
the difference between external AI and internal AI,
Yeah.
particularly externally sourced AI versus internally sourced AI.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great question. And before we kind of get into that, I know we see a lot of the comments coming through, so those are amazing. Keep them coming. We'll get to them like throughout the conversation. Usually, the latter half of these lives are all Q&A, where we just talk about what you want to hear, because the goal is to bring you value, not to just listen to us talk. So keep those coming. I think you hit on something that is critical, is those incremental gains of AI, not an instant transformation, right? When we plug and play AI, and that's really the narrative in the marketplace, then expect things to change, and we forget that transformations take work. And that's where that architecture comes into play. Having that enterprise architecture that contains your ERP and your AI, whether you're talking about internal AI or external, those are all need to be built into that architecture. And understanding that that's going to take time to assimilate, not only functionally, right, but culturally. It's going to take time for your team to learn what that's a whole new way of working, which is a massive transformation just in itself. And when we're talking, you always say, and flip this back on, is really you should own your internal AI. And if you have an enterprise level, that is your intellectual property. You should own that. That's a difference between external AI platforms or tools that you can plug into something like the front end of business to acquire leads or acquire customers, anything like that, as opposed to your automation in your manufacturing or supply chain be something that's customized to your business and owned by you as your intellectual property, because that's part of the ROI, right? Is not taking it and leveraging that from a vendor. It sounds like scaling that to potentially another competitor, right?
Yeah, well, I think that especially when you start thinking about AI and how you architect that in, it's not just how AI is a part of your technology architecture. It should be a part of your enterprise organizational architecture. Your people are involved in that type of architecture. Your
Good point.
processes are involved in that type of architecture. Your strategy is involved in that type of architecture. And all of these things come together. And the way that I like to think about it is your business is your house, the house you live in, right? It
Mhm.
has different rooms, it has different purposes, different people live in different rooms, and they have different needs in each function. And then there's the inside, and then you also have to architect the outside, especially as it pertains to AI, right? You're going to landscape your yard, and that's going to be more visible to the public. The way that you architect your interactions with external AI should understand that what you're showing to external AI is available
Mhm.
to external entities,
Mhm.
and what you keep behind lock and key is not, unless you invite them into it. And I think that there's so many opportunities to use that type of analogy to just simply say, if you want it on the internet, let it be on the internet. If you don't want it on the internet, be intentional about that. Know what you don't want being used. It's not that any AI is going to say your company name is doing this in AI. That's not going to happen because it doesn't
Mhm.
source that way. But at the end of the day, though, when you start having ideas about how it is you're going to create a competitive advantage, all of those thoughts become a part of the learning model in external AI that becomes available to everybody else. So make
Yeah.
those learnings internal to you. And the more you can keep those learnings internal to you, the more those learnings become proprietary and unique to your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a great question from Joe here on LinkedIn. Which approach, internal or external, gets us to the minimum viable product or live deployment faster? That's actually a really good question. And it totally depends on what you're doing. I know that's such a cop out answer, but the foundation is you should not let a vendor answer that for you, right? You should
Yeah.
absolutely be answering that as your own strategic IT leadership or that type of thing. And so I'm curious, Adam, what your thoughts are, internal or external. What gets you to the minimum viable product or live deployment faster?
External is going to be faster. And
Yeah.
the only reason for that is because it has a knowledge base to start from, right? You don't have to create that and you don't have to teach it, right? This is hiring a person that already knows how to do it versus training somebody. But you
Hmm.
know what's a better long term
Yeah.
answer? Training somebody, right? And this isn't exactly directly connected, but I'm going back to something that a quote that somebody shared with me from grad school on the importance of organizational development. And the question that they brought up was the kind of the quintessential CFO versus CHRO, where chief finance officer says, what if we spend all this money training this person and training these people and they leave? Well, that sucks. But the CHRO comes in and says, what if we don't spend this money
Yeah.
training these people and they stay?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I like that quote for this conversation because your AI won't leave. You should invest in training it.
Mhm.
So that risk that we would spend this time training is mitigated when we talk
Mhm.
about AI because you do own that. It's not a
Yeah.
person that can make its own decision and say, I'm retiring or I'm quitting to go work for your competitor unless you don't lock that down, right?
Yeah.
Your AI can work for you and your competitor if you're not paying attention. If
Yeah.
you're buying it from somebody else who is externally sourcing it in a way that doesn't allow you to have that type of control.
Yeah.
So lock your
And
knowledge base down,
yeah.
keep it for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Well said, well said. And I think this question is really the thesis of why companies are having a hard time because it's all built on speed. How can we do this fast? We got to get an AI fast. But they forget the value, right? Piece of that. You can do a lot of things fast, right? Does that mean that it's going to get you any value? I don't know, right? Like maybe,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it's going to be faster external for sure. What's going to get you more return on your investment internal for sure. So you just got to consider that, right?
Well, and we're playing with that model ourselves, and we hope to have a
Hmm.
big announcement next week on this. But um, the idea being that you can get something up and running externally, and you can use
Hmm.
that as kind of a use case, right? How is this going to function? We can test it. We can get at least the process down. We can know what our process is going to be. So then when
Hmm.
we pull it internal,
Hmm.
it becomes proprietary to us, and we can be creating the knowledge base alongside while testing the process and all of those things. We're architecting in that same exact conversation. It's a unique use case, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it's driven intentionally by who's doing which parts of this job.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
is our process going to look like? Where do we need to change our process?
Hmm.
We had a couple of hiccups this week
Yeah.
that are kind of a kick in the mouth, right? And then we found that our AI vendors are not responsive.
Oh no,
Uh,
I mean, they could care less whether we lived or died. Absolutely. Like, and that is one thing that we really struggle with our clients, right? Too. Same thing. So,
yeah, so it's just something that we're working with it the same way anybody else is, and we're gonna get it right, and we're gonna re-architect it where we need to, and then and know what it is we're doing is that might be temporary versus long term, and all of those things. So that's something that you should know that you should do. You should do it internally and externally, and you can try all kinds of different things and then use them to learn and grow yourselves too, because people, you can't talk about AI, and this is one of those things that's kind of the vendor nonsense. You just plug in AI and it goes and does it. Like, no, it doesn't. If you go and let AI go and do something by itself,
mhm,
it's not going to do what it is you want it to do. I can promise you that, because it
mhm,
needs guidance and it needs to be connected to the other things that matter in your business. And that's
mhm,
something that I think is important to remember when we start thinking about the vendor nonsense, which is, with it's fast, it's easy, and it will bring you
mhm.
unspoken results. Like, does anybody else believe that stuff? Like,
No, I
it's
mean, and that's the thing we're trying to change. If someone says that to you in a demo, like that is a huge red flag because transformations take work, right? And there
yeah,
might be things that they can streamline, but we see this all the time with things like Rise with SAP. Moving from ECC to S/4HANA is a huge business decision.
yeah,
Even if you invest in Rise and their methodology, which, obviously we have lots of thoughts on that if you visit our social media channels at the Confluential or follow Adam or myself. But that is a huge transformation. When it comes to leveraging AI in the business unit, that's a good thing that I think we can take from this example that we learned. When we select a new AI platform going forward, we want to know how we get a hold of you, right? We want a phone number, we want a calendarly link, we want something that we know that when we have a critical bug like we experienced this week, we have a line of contact. That wasn't something that we considered when putting this in with a lot of younger members of our team, not because they, haven't done a spectacular job in pioneering this. It's just something we never considered. Typically, when you need support on some in a platform, you can find it. In this case, being all generative AI, that doesn't exist. And it was something that we never considered, but it will be a consideration moving forward.
Oh yeah.
Um, so let's get to some of these other amazing questions. These are thank you so much for putting these in the chat. I'm going to go back to one that we had earlier. So for those listening on our podcast platforms, how should companies assess vendor claims when everyone seems to be selling AI powered everything? Excellent question, Adam. I'll let you start.
Oh, well, the first thing is, how long have they said? Do they say they've been doing it for? Right, AI is relatively new. It's something that, if they say they've been doing it for more than 5 years, they either worked on the Mars rover or they're lying to you. Right, like this is this is not a fair representation. Now, business intelligence is a precursor to AI, that a lot of people are stretching the truth on. So think about it that way. How long have they been saying that they've been doing it for? And if they say they've been doing it for decades, then they're simply not telling you the truth. Other things that are important to say is, we do everything in AI. AI can do everything for you. Nobody's AI does everything. Everybody's AI does one, maybe two things. Even people who are involved in AI do it with one or two things for the most part. And that's something that I think is an important thing to remember. This industry is still growing. It's an entire economy that is being pieced together, all by lots of different actors. So when people start claiming things, the things that you should watch out for are words and understandings. They're like, we do everything with our AI. False. Nobody does everything with their AI. Next, we've been doing it for a long time. False. Nobody's been doing this for a long time. It's new. The next thing to watch out for, it's easy. It's not. The idea that anything in business is easy is false. And when you start talking about the types of things that create the type of disruption that AI brings to the table, not just to the market, but to your business internally, that's not easy. So those are the types of things. It's fast. It does everything. It's been around forever. It's easy. Those are all things that when people tell you those things, it's a misdirection. And you should hear that as exactly the opposite. The easier and the better it sounds from a salesman's mouth, usually the harder it is and the longer it takes. So I think that's where I would go with it. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would take it on the same level. I think the other take I'll give to this question, because I think you answered it beautifully, is just when you are starting to talk to your ERP vendors. Because Adam said it is new to the marketplace. A lot of people come in, especially in my comments, and say AI has been around for a long time. Yes, you're not wrong, right? AI has been around for a minute, right? Functionally, but the way that we're implementing it in the workforce right now has not, right? So there's some capacity of AI. Have we had robotics? Have we had drones? Have we had, yeah, for sure, but they've been used by the Department of Defense or areas in which we don't have Amazon right now delivering via drones across the world, right? That's just not something that we're used to at this point. ChatGPT completely changed the landscape of how things are utilized and drafted in the workplace or just in general. And now there's integrations across email, across all different applications for ChatGPT or chat links that give you that opportunity to generate certain content. That all has been around, but it's never been utilized the way that we're utilizing it now. And that's what's important to understand in these vendor conversations is, yeah, they could have said like NetSuite a lot of times. I'm not bagging on NetSuite, great product. they've said we've been in the cloud for 20 years. Are they right about that? Yeah, they are, but to an extent, right, where the rest of their customers have not had that sort of cloud technology or that full cloud ecosystem before, right? So a lot of times when they say that, that doesn't necessarily mean it's mature enough to handle the requirements that you need. And I think the last thing I'll add to this is a lot of people ask me, should I call my ERP vendor when I want to start building out this AI? For sure, absolutely. Give them a call, see what's going on. I always recommend calling them right with your advisor so they can kind of gut check like all these words that they're saying. Yes, there is a lot of, over of crossover between ERP and AI, but at this point, an enterprise level AI system is very rare, not something that's incredibly helpful because we're using AI business unit by business unit. Our AI in manufacturing and supply chain looks much different than our AI in accounting, right? They do two very different things. So looking at that in AI powered ERP, yeah, but really what does that mean? And let's break that down. Let's not say AI powered anything, right? Let's say what is the AI doing to actually prove the value of what the system I'm going to invest in?
Well, I think that this question about what is AI new or just more visible now, this is definitionally based, right? Is AI new? No, I mean for goodness sake, AI existed in Terminator 2,
Mm-hmm.
right? That just call it whatever it is you want. There's artificial intelligence in that, depending on how it is you slice this up. AI as a concept has been around for ages. AI in practice, in the academic sense, has been around for quite some time, right?
Mm-hmm.
The original, the Mars rovers for me are just the
Wow.
most fascinating things.
We can't go through a live stream without talking about space or Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's
Um,
impossible for us not
well,
to.
they're impressive things, but the idea that something could make its own decisions on how it lands on another planet because it takes too long. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the the sequence that it took for the original Mars rover, not the one that you're seeing all the stuff on the news on now, the original one. I mean, it's like an 18-minute sequence, or
Mm-hmm.
less, and it took longer to send the signal to and from Earth to Mars than that whole sequence. So
Mm-hmm.
they called it like the dead zone or something like that. The community, whatever it is, they called it. But the idea is like it's on its own. It has to
Mm-hmm.
figure it out by itself. So how does it land on Mars and all these other things that can happen if there's a gust of wind or whatever? It had to figure out for itself. So yeah, that's been around for it has been around for decades. That's true. I
Mm-hmm.
remember it's been probably 10 years now, sitting with the client in Infor talking about Coleman AI. And I remember being like, that's
Mm-hmm.
the I don't know. That sounds more like a
That
Wikipedia
sounds
type
made up. That's like
of
Clippy.
right. It's Bull Clippy was AI as
I
well, right? So
know. I'm telling you.
yeah, it's not new, but those were I think of all of those use cases and how it is they function and how terrible they were for the actual people on this planet, right? Um, AI as a useful tool that can be functional to a person is now pretty new in that
Yeah.
use case. AI as a business tool that's useful in your organization doesn't exist yet at the full scale capacity. It
Well
exists
said.
in pieces. That's
Mm-hmm.
the best way I would think about that. So you just need to be
Yeah.
careful when you're thinking about that. And I think that this is kind of where you start thinking about minimum viable products and those
Mm-hmm.
types of things. And this is in a direct answer to Joe's question on MVPs, particularly. Um, the idea here is that you need to have what is a true definition of a minimum viable product, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
What's
the hard part.
what's the
Yeah.
small bite-sized thing that adds
Mm-hmm.
value? The biggest problem that people have is they think that a minimum viable product is an AI that runs their entire supply chain.
Yeah. That's so true. So well said. Yeah,
So
absolutely. That's a great point.
that's my opinion, and I know I'm on a bit of a rant on it because I'm excited, um, but at the end of the day, think of it in small pieces and be realistic. Take small steps quickly, and you will get far more down the road than if you try to take one big leap. Especially if you try to take one big leap and you miss your footing and you trip and fall on your face.
Yeah, absolutely. Minimum viable products are hard, especially within transformations, because when we get obsessed with this idea of a minimum viable product, then we forget why we're here, right? And we forget the journey that we're on. When it's like it's very similar to like a go live date. Your go live date is completely made up until you've done your testing, right? Like you have zero idea, right? You may say our go live date is July 28th. But until you've really done those testing sequences and a lot of that understanding as far as does this work for this business area or does it not, it's really delusional, your go live date. And so minimum viable products, you really have to understand, what am I trying to achieve here? And how do I define sustained value? Is that something like an ERP implementation where in 3 years I see that value, or I see me being more efficient, or I see myself mining my process? Or is it, I did a hyper targeted AI system that I implemented in my process manufacturing overall shop floor, and I want to see that work in 90 days to make sure that we're more efficient and we're creating less waste. If you have, a very critical and focused target like that, that is much easier to understand sustained value. I think the way that I would focus on this question, what are the most common reasons external AI MVPs fail to deliver sustained value even if they launch faster? Because it's external. You're relying on someone else to influence your own business strategy, right? And it's going to be on their timeline, when they respond to you, when they upgrade, when they add new features. And so that value is not within your circle of influence anymore, and that's why that's a challenge to sustain value, because it's just not on your schedule.
Well, I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, at the end of the day, you need to be able to say what you expect out of it. I like this question: what role should AI play in shaping long-term operational strategy, not just short-term optimization? Um, you know, it should play a role as an advisor, right?
Yeah,
Use it as a
agreed.
sounding board. Ask AI questions and then ask it to ask you questions. Those are
Mhm.
awesome ways of doing it. But at the end of the day, the role that AI should play is as an advisor, as a thought partner. It's not the leader of your organization, and it
Mhm.
shouldn't be. What it should be is a source of information, especially as it lives and breathes today, right? You can get a lot of great information out of an AI on the internet by having a conversation with it and asking it to
Mhm.
ask you questions, asking it questions, and making this discussion based. But at the end of the day, the role it should play is as an advisor, so that it can provide you with ideas that you can then use to become more effective. That's the
Mhm.
best way of using AI. And if you have your ideas and your expectations set properly, that's when you start thinking about how it is you get the most out of a minimum viable product and how you get the most out of the next minimum viable product and the next one. These are things that you can create step by step, and you can
Mhm.
get value in step by step and know how to architect it in steps. And that's what I think is important about AI, and the idea that vendors are putting out there like they do everything, and they don't. Um, at the end of the day, applications in AI, one of the things that I'm super excited about here coming up in June is I'm going to go to this super AI conference in Singapore. And my
Mhm.
only goal in that is going to be learning all of the crazy applications of AI in a
Mhm.
corner of the world where it thrives the most, and seeing how it's being used in individual use cases. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that as a source of information to be able to think about how those use cases can be combined into something valuable, right? This AI does this AI does that, this one does this, and this does that. How do I now piece those things together? Which ones are
Mhm.
valuable to each other so that we can plug them in and consolidate them into consolidate multiple use cases into one scenario. So
Mhm.
now we're really using AI well, as opposed to it being some kind of uh, cheap, neat trinket.
Yeah, absolutely. And that'll be great. I know Adam's going to launch some scheduling time with him if you're going to that conference. But I think that's a big piece of this question is AI should be within your operational strategy as something that is measurable and that you can understand. If it's not, and it's more just theory based of like this will be similar to our one of our biggest strategies for 2025 is AI. That doesn't mean anything, right? That means absolutely nothing. That's just a sentence. AI strategy could be in many layers of the organization in that level. So that's one thing that always frustrates me, with our current marketplace is when we have vendors coming saying, I do AI, when really they can just change your email to be more change management focused. And it's like, you know what? Yes. Is that technically AI? Sure. Is that useful as the head of manufacturing? Absolutely. Right. So that's the
Oh, I
level.
think
And
that's
you
a
just
great
have to be.
example, right? Grammarly. You could plug Grammarly into so many things, and you can consider Grammarly AI, and you can do all kinds of
It
things.
is it. Yeah.
Does
Grammarly is
it does
AI.
it
Yeah.
does does it matter to me if Grammarly is telling me that all of my texts and chats in Teams are entirely punctuation free? No, I don't care. I don't know the last time I capitalized a word in Teams that wasn't capitalized for me by autocorrect. That
Yeah.
doesn't matter to me. What matters is the substance in it, and that's where you need to differentiate amongst the different types of things, right? AI can
Hmm.
do some neat stuff. Does it add value with the neat stuff that it does?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I want to tackle one of these interesting questions here too. I like this one. Will relying on external AI partners limit organizations' ability to build AI literacy and internal capability? And the answer
Oh,
is
absolutely.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But this is true with everything, right? You can learn a lot from our ERP experience in this, and leaning too hard on your ERP implementer to do your ERP for you will limit your ability to use your ERP in the
Hmm.
future in various ways. In some ways, leaning too hard on vendors like Accenture and Deloitte has led companies to be so dependent on them that they don't go away at all. They stick
No.
around forever because they own the code. Now
Terrifying.
you are directly dependent on them.
Hmm.
But there are other mistakes that you can make in leaning too hard on an external organization's ability to teach you by not learning. Right? I can. This is the teach someone to fish and they will eat for the rest of their lives versus give them a fish and they'll eat for a day. Your
Hmm.
vendor wants you to eat today, and then they want to feed you tomorrow, and then they want to feed you the next day. What's important for you is to realize that as you're being fed this AI capability, your organization needs to be learning and absorbing it along the way so that your architecture is at the enterprise level doesn't now include a new entity which is an external partner that is now dependent on. And you can rip this band-aid off whenever you want,
Hmm.
right? You can always kick them out later, that's fine, but it gets harder and harder to do it. And the uh, the folks that I'm visiting here in
Hmm.
Washington today, they became dependent on a vendor
Hmm.
who they started getting to the habit of saying, I need to talk to them. They need to answer this question for me. They stopped thinking for themselves.
Hmm.
And if you make that mistake with AI and you stop thinking for yourself and you start letting AI or your AI partner do the thinking for you,
Hmm.
that's on the wrong side of the tracks for me.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that's a great way to put that. I think that the AI literacy has been something that has been a big focus. The way that I'll answer this question is just understanding that AI literacy can birth a lot of fear in the organization, right? So when we're talking about AI literacy, it's absolutely critical that you understand your current AI literacy within the organization before you start layering on, we're building this capability in house. Because so many times that's where we see this, AI fear factor, right? That Terminator effect, and talking about what that looks like, that we're scared of AI, as opposed to just being a business, right? All you that you're utilizing this for is part of the platform in which to utilize technology on a daily basis. So understanding what that looks like before building that internal ability is going to give you that opportunity to effectively work with your partners as they should be partners, right? They should not be someone you're reliant on, as Adam said, for every question and every answer. They also shouldn't control your internal organizational structure around AI, because there's just different conflicting agendas in that. And you, as a business leader, that's your responsibility to really build up and understand that kind of professional skepticism that comes with working with technology vendors. They're there to sell you more product, they have quotas, they have things that they need to meet, right? And that's what a lot of this is built around. So this is such a good question. And I know we didn't get to all of these amazing questions today. Adam has to kind of head out to work with our client in the Spokane area. We will go back in and answer all these questions as we always do. Thank you so much for all of the amazing commentary here. If you have thoughts on AI topics, opinion, you take a different take, you can see Adam and I answer these questions differently depending on our own opinion, you're welcome and appreciated too. Because then showcasing that there is no right option, the only right option is what's best for your business. So thank you so much to the audience. Thank you to you, Adam. We'll see you next week on Thursday. Just a reminder, you can get all of our lives on our social channels at The Confluential. I usually recommend YouTube. They're organized there, as well as our sister podcast, which is Bite Size, which I host with some industry leaders. You can get those there as well. And then we will see you guys next week. If you have to discuss, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We always look at those, make sure that we're making this as valuable as possible. So good luck today, Adam. I hope everything goes well. It's a big milestone in this project for our clients. So we're extremely them, and we will see everyone next week.